Do you know the 14 traits of successful chiropractors? We've interviewed some of the top chiropractors in the industry and have identified the common traits that they all share. Jump on over to www.chirobusinessmojo.com to get your free report today.
Welcome to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast, where we deconstruct the methods, marketing, and mindset of successful business people and chiropractors from around the world. And now your host, Dr. Richard Day.
That is no lie. I am Dr. Richard Day, and this is the Chiro Business Mojo podcast. Thanks so much for checking in with us here today. Well, I am serving up some fresh mojo for you today.
Mojo.
Yes, soak it in, because I've got Mr. Shane Purnell on the show. Shane is an IT professional, podcaster, WordPress user, and public speaker. He's spent the last 18 years studying how to help others connect their message to the world through new media. He has multiple blogs on technology, personal development, and platform building, and he has hosted the Platform Giant podcast since 2014, where he helps entrepreneurs build their brand through personal speaking, leadership, platform building, and more. Welcome, Mr. Shane Purnell.
It is great to be here. Very excited to be on the podcast.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today, and feel free to jump in and fill in any gaps I may have glossed over in that bio.
Sure. I know. I think you nailed it. That pretty much sums me up. I've been reduced to a couple sentences.
Well, we could certainly add some more to that as time goes. Why don't you tell us about the Platform Giant? You started out in IT, and now you're doing this podcast. How'd you get there?
Well, that's kind of a funny story, and you said the Platform Giant, which has kind of been a blessing and a curse, because when I started the podcast called the Platform Giant Show, the whole idea behind that podcast was to help people build a platform for themselves, to help them stand head and shoulders above the crowd. I wanted them to be platform giants. And what's happened as time has gone on is people say, oh, you're the platform giant. I'm like, no, I'm not the platform giant. You're the platform giant. And so finally I had a friend say, look, people are not going to stop saying that, so you just need to own it. So that's where that comes. And so that is the platform giant. I guess I am the platform giant, but really I'm not, because it's about the crowd. But how this all started for me was I graduated with a degree in speech communication. And if you have a degree in communication, you know that qualifies you for a brilliant career in entry-level work. And I bounced around working customer service, working inside sales, outside sales, management, and built up some business skills. And I realized after about 7 years of doing that I wasn't going to get where I wanted to go as fast as I wanted to get there. And this was in the late 90s, and this was about the time that this new thing called the internet was starting to creep into everyone's vocabulary. And this field called information technology became very hot. All of a sudden, if you had experience in information technology, if you knew about clients, servers, networking, the internet, anything like that, you could pretty much get a job anywhere. And I said, this is where I want to be. And I started looking into IT and went to school, learned about Microsoft networking technology back in the days when Microsoft's server was called NT. And I think that stands for new technology. It's been a long time ago, but this predates 2000, and I jumped into this field called IT, and I absolutely loved it. It was new, it was exciting, and it changed every couple of years. I was always learning something new. And so I've been doing that for about the last 20 years, but I've never forgotten about the lessons that I learned in customer service, learned during my college days, speech communication, standing up in front of people, doing presentations and debate and that type of thing. And I never forgot the human element of communication. And so I always kind of had this dichotomy of the part of me that loved communication, loved talking with people, loved discussing ideas, loved creating ideas and working in that fashion. And then over here on this other side, I had this really geeky, nerdy side that loved all of the gadgets and how networks worked and all of that. And a few years ago, Michael Hyatt, an author, wrote this book called Platform, Get Noticed in a Noisy World. And I read that book, this was in 2012, and I said, this is it. This is the merger of all of the cool communication stuff I love and all of the nerdy stuff of the internet that I'm really into kind of brought together. And so I started studying how to build a platform. And over the last 4 or 5 years, I've really dug into this idea, and it's just been this great marriage of communication coupled with technology. And that really is the world we're living in right now, where you can literally connect to anyone or any place in the world at any time and have these great conversations, discuss these ideas, and it's all facilitated through technology.
Yeah, it's really cool. I have not read that book, but I'm seeing the same things you are. I mean, the convergence of Facebook and social media, and then, digital media, and what we're doing on this podcast here. It seems like there are so many tools out there. Have I named them all, or what else is going on out there to build a brand or a platform?
Well, really, it's a wider view than even what you think, because we've actually got to the point now where we've got these big network pipes called broadband, and we have technologies. We've got these great people who make software, and they make it easier and easier. And all of these technologies that were really complicated at first have been brought to the point where everyday people can start using them to connect. And so literally we have this, I hate to use this term, this worldwide web, this audience that is accessible anywhere, anytime. And we have this abstraction layer of technology that brings back communication. So we are going back to what it's always been and the things that were always important, but it's being facilitated by people who are really good at math and logic and making computer programs. And so it's a very exciting place. So it doesn't really matter so much anymore what the specific platform is, whether you're talking social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, that type of thing, or you're talking a video platform like YouTube or a podcast that's delivered via RSS like this. These are just channels for delivering a message, for facilitating human communication.
Well, I was looking over some of the services you provide, and one of the things I saw in there is that you're a public speaker. So how did you get into that, and what can people do to get better at that? I mean, it's no secret that's probably the biggest fear most of us have, is having to get up in front of people and talk. And again, what we're doing now is a podcast, so that might be a fear for people, a barrier keeping them from getting into this sort of thing.
Public speaking is such an important skill in the world we live in. Like I just said, we live in a world where we've kind of gone back to this communal aspect. Communities are very important now, right? Facebook groups. Everybody wants a Facebook group. Why? Because it brings people together. This aspect of community is so important. And as multimedia technologies, podcasting, video through YouTube and Vimeo, and all of those things come about, our ability to communicate our ideas and share our ideas and persuade, convince, and influence people is more important now than it's ever been. So public speaking is a skill that everybody, I believe, everybody needs to be working on. Some people think it's a soft skill and they don't need it, but I'm kind of in the camp that you need to learn to share your ideas in an articulate way. And how I got into that was going back to college. I found that I absolutely was energized by the opportunity to share my ideas with other people. So for me, doing the public speaking thing was quite natural. But in the world I was living in, information technology, not so much anymore, but nerds always had that reputation for not being very good communicators. So it's kind of like being the one-eyed man in the world of the blind. I was able to speak and communicate. So I often found myself being the bridge between the very technical people and the people who didn't understand the technology. So when we talk about public speaking and people being afraid of it, this is something that people are just going to have to start learning to embrace. And I know it's a big fear for a lot of people, but so is everything that's new when you first start it.
Looking over the Platform Giant and seeing what you offer, if I were to approach you, for example, and say, hey, I maybe have a website and a Facebook page, but in our business, we're chiropractors, where should I go? What's the next step? What would you tell me, or what would you do for me?
Well, it depends on what your goals are. For most people, and for the people that I deal with a lot, they're looking to establish themselves as authority or subject matter experts in their field. They want to be the go-to person when it comes to their particular topic. So, of course, we start getting into the topic then of personal branding. and your reputation that goes before you. No matter what, everybody has a personal brand. So we start with personal branding. We take a look at online reputation. We look at things like establishing a website, a domain name that has your name in it. And we start looking then for ways for you to be the owner of the conversation that happens about you and your subject.
Well, I want to shift now and talk a little bit less about the specifics, and let's just move into being successful. That's a topic, one of my favorites on this show that I want to touch on, and you have interviewed a lot of successful people on your show. Is there a common set of traits or a commonality that they all possess?
I think the thing that surprised me most in talking to people about their success, and thank you, yes, I've been very fortunate to have some incredible people on the show, people who've been very generous with their time, is that these successful people that I've talked to, the thing that surprised me most was that they invest in themselves, every single one of them. They work harder on who they are than what they do. You know, and I think it was Jim Rohn who said your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development. And from what I found, that is one thing that all of these people have, is they are not afraid to spend money on a course or hiring a coach or finding someone who can help them get to the next level. They're not afraid to spend that money. I also think that they're generous with their knowledge. And I had a big misconception about success for a long time because I thought success was kind of like the game of Survivor. You know, you had to outwit and outplay and outlast everyone. But the more I've gotten around successful people, I have found that they view success as a team sport. And they know that if they help you succeed, that at some point in the future, you're going to be more successful and you're going to be willing to help them succeed. So I think that when I look back, probably 90% of the people I've interviewed, if I asked them for some help on something specific, they would give me their time and their opinion without hesitation.
Yeah, I want to stop right there and just talk about that or touch on that. You know, recently on my podcast, I talked about Stephen Covey's successful habits of highly effective people, and one of them was the scarcity mindset. He's the one that came up with the abundance versus scarcity mindset, and it was the idea that, look, there's more than enough pieces of pie to go around, and it's so counterintuitive. I think we're so much, we want to grab ours and have what's ours is ours, and we're going to protect that. But I think you're right. These people that are so successful, they're coming at it differently. They're going to give first and give freely and invest themselves, and this sort of abundance thing kicks in. And it's fascinating to me. It's taken me a long time to really start to see it and realize that it has real power.
Yeah, I think the thing that people get wrong, and I hear this all the time, is people say, "Oh, so you need to. I'm going to do something for you, so you can do something for me." It's not one hand washes the other. What these people are doing, and as I've started to do it, I see the value in it. What these people are doing is they're giving without the thought of what they're going to get back. They're sowing seeds. They're like a farmer going out in the field and sowing seeds. And there's going to be a crop that's going to be produced from those seeds, but the farmer doesn't know when he's scattering the seeds which seeds are going to plant and bear fruit. The farmer just worries about getting the seeds in the ground and then taking care of and nurturing what he's planted. And then really after that, it's really up to the seeds.
Well, in your mind, what really makes a good leader? We have so many thought leaders out there now. What makes a great leader?
I think what makes a great leader is that a great leader is willing to come in last. Now, a lot of people think that being a great leader means that you get all of the perks and the privileges, the corner office and the expense account and the nice company car and all of that. And really kind of what I found is that great leaders aren't really worried about what's in it for them as much as they're focused on getting everyone to the goal. What I found is like when you're leading, you're really worried a lot less about if you get the biggest office or the best or the most, and what you're really doing. Great leaders, what I've seen, are really carrying the load. They're carrying the weight of the team on their shoulders, and they're focused on how they can make the team better. They're worried about clearing obstacles to make sure that the team gets there. And if that means that they're working late, or if they don't get to go do something, or that if the employees get the credit, then that's the sign of great leadership. They are servants first, and then they worry about the glory after the team gets the glory.
Well, when you think of the word success, who do you think of and why?
Oh, there's only one person, and this has been recently. It's Bob Berg. You may know Bob. He was the author of a book called The Go-Giver. It's a fantastic book. He wrote it with a guy named John David Mann. And Bob really sums up what true success is to me. And in the book, just really quickly, Bob goes through, it's a fictional account, it's a business parable, and there's 5 laws that are brought forth of stratospheric success. And just really quickly, there are things like, your true worth is determined by how much more you give in service than you take in payment. Your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. And your influence is determined by how abundantly you place others' interests before your first. Things like that. And when I met Bob, from the moment that he agreed to be on my podcast and do an interview, every interaction I had with Bob, he modeled the behaviors in that book, The Go-Giver. He was kind. He was generous with his time. He focused on making sure everything was okay and that I was comfortable with things and putting me first. And I've kept an eye on what he does. I've listened to other interviews he's done, and I've talked to people who know him, and they say that's really the way Bob Burg is. And so for me, he is the embodiment of what I want to be and what I see as successful.
Well, let's shift. I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the successes you've had. We've covered those, but let's go to maybe some of the challenges or failures that you've faced and overcome. We learn so much from success, but even more from failures.
Yeah, I thought about this a lot lately. I've been thinking about failures, and what I've really kind of come to the conclusion, for me personally, I never really have, I see the failures that I've had, and there's lessons that I've learned, but for me, everything kind of seems to evolve. We're all so busy living our lives that we just kind of evolve, and we learn these lessons. And so for me, failures really are more lessons. And one of the lessons that I've been learning a lot lately is just learning to appreciate my impact. And I'm not saying that in an arrogant way. What I'm talking about is really on a much more local and an interpersonal level. I've always been very busy trying to get to the next level or conquer the next thing, and I always haven't been good about understanding just how much each of us has an impact. What we say, what we do, how we respond to other people, it creates an impact on them. And it's very easy to get reckless with that responsibility. It's easy to say something careless and hurt someone's feelings. It's easy to get busy with your own things and forget to show up for other people, just being there in that moment with them. And as I'm getting older, I'm really starting to appreciate the impact of just being in other people's lives and being present for other people. And that's a huge lesson that I didn't learn for a long time. And now it's really starting to really become very obvious to me. And I can't remember who said this. Someone a long time ago as I was early on in my career, said that, life gives pass-fail tests. And you'll keep getting the same lesson until you pass the test. Until you master that thing, life will keep bringing it back to you. Once you overcome that, then life will give you a new lesson. And so each time I've failed, there's been that lesson, but I don't think there's been one thing in particular that said, oh, when that happened, it changed everything for me. It's been a slower evolution.
Well, this train is getting ready to pull into the station, but before we do, I have a couple of final thoughts. Do you have a favorite book you would like to recommend to our listeners?
Are you kidding? I could do a whole show on favorite books.
You mentioned Bob Burg's book. We're going to definitely link to that in the show notes. But yeah, give us a couple, just maybe 2 or 3 of the others.
2 or 3. Okay. Really 2 of my favorite from the last year. One is The Art of Work by Jeff Goins. And that really is about learning to embrace what you do, going through an apprenticeship, through becoming a journeyman and then becoming a master, and kind of heeding the call of your life and learning what your life's work is, and that process, that painful process of deliberately practicing and improving. That's been one thing. Another great book, which is on the same topic and came out around the same time, but it's by a guy named Todd Henry, and it's Louder Than Words. And that came out, like I said, last year, and that's kind of about heeding your authentic voice, listening to the call of what life is trying to tell you about what you're good at, what you're meant to do, and the direction you should go. Those are probably 2 of my favorite in the last year.
Well, what's the best business advice you've ever received?
I think it came from my mom, who is not a businessman, obviously, but she said you got to make hay when the sun shines. And I just thought that's always stuck with me is every time you have an opportunity, you need to seize that opportunity because it may not be there. So got to make hay when the sun shines is great business advice.
Well, what is exciting you the most about the platform giant today?
I'll tell you, the thing that's exciting me most is the opportunity to network, to connect with people, to build relationships. The more I have focused on building relationships with people, connecting with them, and just seeing where that goes, the more opportunities have opened up. And a lot of those are a direct result of the podcast. Just the ability to connect with people I normally wouldn't get to talk to, learn from them, and then see if there's a relationship that can help both people carrying forward. And that just excites me, and the opportunities that have come from that have been beyond my wildest expectations.
Well, Shane, time is so valuable and precious to us all. I really want to thank you for spending some of your valuable and precious time with us here today and our listeners. What is the best way for people to connect with you and find out more about what you do and your business?
Easiest way is my two websites. You can go to shanepurnell.com or platformgiant.com. I'm very active on Twitter. You can find me there at Hey Shane Purnell or Platform Giant, either one of those. And then if you're interested more on a business type of relationship, just reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me a connection request. Don't send me a generic request or I won't know, but tell me that you heard about me on this podcast, and let's see if there's something that we can do together. I would absolutely love the opportunity to build a business relationship with you and see where it goes.
Well, thanks so much again for everything you've told us today.
Thanks for listening to the Cairo Business Mojo podcast at www.cairobusinessmojo.com.